Welcome back to the channel, guys. In today's video, we're going to take a look at Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins. Real quick, guys, before we get into today's video, just want to let you guys know that you guys are freaking awesome. I appreciate all the time that you guys take out of your day to watch my videos. So please don't forget to like and subscribe. You guys are freaking awesome. And without further ado, let's just hop right into it. So this is technically my second Final Fantasy game. My very first one was Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I freaking loved that game. And so when I heard that they were making, I want to say it's a remake of Final Fantasy 1. I haven't played any of the Final Fantasy games outside of 7 Remake, but I figured since this is supposed to be the remake of the first one, that I'd get right into it. And if I'm going to be honest, guys, I was incredibly let down. And I think that's understating it just a little bit here. I went in with the mindset of like, oh, this is going to be a lot like, Final Fantasy VII. No, it's totally, it's got the similarities. Like, I did enjoy seeing, some parts that we're going to talk about later. But as far as just like the story, the gameplay, graphics, there's just so much that is different from Final Fantasy that I'm not sure that this game might resonate with a lot of people. And I'm not even like a hardcore Final Fantasy fan that's been playing these games since day one. I'm a newbie here, and even I was like, I don't know if I'm too much into this one. Let's just talk about the story. So the story here, you play as Jack, and he is here to kill Chaos.
All I care about is seeing Chaos dead.
And he says it probably like 1,000 times, and it gets annoying real quick. But thankfully, he only really says that kind of at the first, couple hours of the game. And I'm like, okay, Jack, we get it. You're here to kill Chaos. Nothing else matters. But the story just itself is very generic, I would say. Basically, first of all, I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody that does decide to go out and purchase this game. I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. But just in case I do accidentally spoil it, here's your spoiler warning. Now let's just dive into it. Now, basically, you're going around and you're trying to cleanse these crystals for like the vast majority of the game. You like your fire crystal, your wind crystal, your water crystal, and that is basically the gist of everything that you're doing for like the first couple hours of the game, right? And it gets really slow, but I guess for a game made back then, it probably worked. But for a remake, I was just kind of wanting more. There wasn't a whole lot to it. And the story actually gets interesting like towards the end of the game, which kind of sucks because it's like, oh, you literally have to play through this whole, basically the whole game before the story actually gets interesting. Like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, but there gets a turn where it kind of like does a plot twist, and I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But at this point, does it really save the story? No, I don't think it does. Even though I did like the twist, and I thought that it was pretty cool at the end, it's just most of the story is kind of like a slugfest, if I'm being honest. It's not very well written. The story's just not very good. I'm probably going to put a lot of comparisons to Final Fantasy VII here in this video, but that's just because that's the only Final Fantasy game I've ever played. I played a lot of Square Enix games, but that could be made by anybody, right? Obviously, the team that made the Stranger of Paradise is not the same that made FF7. So, talking a little bit about these side quests, there is a lot of side quests in here. Unfortunately, the side quests also really suffer. I did not really enjoy any of the side quests. Basically, you get to your new area in the game, you play through the story mode, or you get to the section on the map, you go through the story, and after you've beaten that particular level, it'll unlock side missions. Sometimes there's 1, 2, and then there's even that got a couple. But it's basically doing the exact same level that you just beat, either backwards or having to complete a different objective, like finding a certain monster and destroying it, finding like these doors and cleansing them. So it's basically the same level, same enemies, it's just you're doing a different task, and I just felt like that was really kind of cheap. I didn't really like it that much. So side quests, not very good. All the characters in the game were kind of forgettable, to be honest. I would probably have to say that my least favorite character in the entire game was Jack. He was just kind of annoying. I just didn't like his character. yes, there's like the funny parts where he's just here to kill chaos, but you know, other than that, he just wasn't a very compelling character, if I'm being honest. Jed and Ash were a lot more compelling, and then I forget the elf's name, the dark elf's name, but all three of those characters are a lot more interesting than Jack was, and even then, they weren't even that interesting. Talking about the gameplay now, guys, the gameplay is probably one of the saving graces of this game. This gameplay was fun. I actually had fun. There's so many different builds you can do, so many different classes. I just had so much fun, you know, taking out enemies and then switching my weapons, or in this game they call them jobs, which is basically the same as, I guess, classes from other games, or you know, different what would you call it? Yeah, I guess classes, like you're the warrior class, the ninja class, stuff like that. This one does it really well. Like, you get your main one, you could play with like the broadsword or whatever, and you unlock it to 30, and then you get like the warriors tab or the samurai tab or the dragoon tab. So it's like you can mix and match a few of them, and even you get to a point where you unlock them and you can have two skill sets, two jobs at the same time that kind of combined multiple jobs. So it's the gameplay and the combat all together was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I haven't played any of the Neo games. This is the same team that did the Neo 1 and 2, and from videos I've seen, it looks very similar to that. Even like the not crafting, but the weapons and stuff like that. A lot of fun. The weapons in this game, there is a ton of loot. Basically, like, I didn't even bother. At the beginning of the game, I was trying to, you know, be on top of it and trying to figure out what the best weapon was, what the best armor was. And after a while, just like, you just get loot so fast that by the time that I, you know, got something that I was like, oh, this is cool, literally 5 seconds later, I'd get something that was better armor or better weapon. And honestly, there's this little button as you're, you know, customizing your character that's kind of like an optimize, and it basically optimizes you with the best gear. Now, I've looked, and that wasn't always necessarily true. Like, sometimes it gave me an armor set or a helmet piece, leg piece that wasn't quite as good, but it always gives you the highest level. So even if the stats weren't as good with it, it always gives you the highest level. And at that point, you know, there's just so much to go through, and you're sifting through it so fast that it was a time sink, and I was just like, you know what? Auto optimize. I did that every single time. And it's unfortunate. There's just so much. There's so many times where I'm just like deleting, you know, because my bag only holds 500, and then the level gives you like 10,000 pieces of loot, and you have to decide what's valuable and what's not. And so there's so many times I was just like tossing stuff, or when I was in the main menu, like dismantling it to try to get some resources, but more times than not, it was right in the middle of a level, and you couldn't do that, and so I was just tossing them. Now, talking about some things that were really bad, and I feel like everybody kind of knows it because they didn't really hide it, was the visuals, man. The visuals are just flat out terrible. When I put this game in, I was like, bro, this looks like this should have been released like years ago on the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, because I did play a little bit of Final Fantasy 13, and I could swear to you that these look very similar, like as far as like graphic quality goes. And I haven't beaten 13 yet, but you know, I was just very unimpressed. I was like, wow, this looks really dated. The combat is really fun, you know, and you can forgive the story because, in my opinion, if the gameplay is fun, that, you know, trumps, you know, graphics. And it did here. I feel like the gameplay here outweighs the graphics, because the graphics were just flat out terrible. There's plenty of times where I had frame drops. No popping or anything, but I just had a lot of like frames, like especially when there's like things exploding and you're, you know, destroying monsters. There's lots of times where like I could tell that the frames were dropping. And I was playing on a PS5, by the way, and I had no such issues with Final Fantasy VII. The level design in this, when you first get to a new like area, it is kind of fun. You're like, oh, you know, let me try to figure out where to go. And there's not just one path. There's like some connecting paths in some areas where you can get lost. So, I mean, it wasn't too difficult, but I enjoyed that there's a little bit of variety. But kind of going back to the graphics just looked so terrible, and the levels themselves just didn't look that good. Like, a lot of the levels just looked like, oh, this looks really bad. I mean, yes, they throw in a few twists and stuff there, you know, with trying to figure out where to go, but overall they just looked terrible. I just wasn't impressed. Even though there was a large variety, wasn't very impressed. And on top of that, a lot of the enemies are not very smart. I tested this because I was just trying to get to the boss, and I was way at the end, and you could just literally run right past all of the enemies, and nobody will follow you. And you can run from the beginning. So if you wanted to, you could literally just start at the beginning, skip literally everything, and go straight for the boss fight. Like, you could. You definitely could. And I don't know, I just kind of found that, like, I don't know, I was like, seriously? Like, nothing's going to stop me from going? Like, nothing's going to chase me? Nothing's going to hit me? Like, no, you could just run all the way to the end if you want. Now, the last thing that I kind of want to touch up on here is the bosses. The bosses, I thought, you know, they were fun, I guess. You could tell that this game was trying to be a Souls-like. But from my, you know, perspective, I didn't really think of Dark Souls once when I was playing this, or Sekiro, or any other From Software game. It was hard, yes. There's definitely some bosses that I felt like were just flat out, like, broken. Like, I was like, dude, how is this even fair? There was one, you know, dragon. Like, a lot of these bosses are meant for, like, obviously multiple people. And so there's a few bosses that would just spam, like, you know, AoE attacks, and so I could never get in to do a hit. I mean, unless I was playing my mage class, which I didn't really like the mage class all that much, and so it made it hard to get in and get some attacks. And you know, I basically had to sacrifice taking some damage just to do anything. But overall, the boss fights I thought were okay. There were some that I thought were really fun, and some that were like, okay, let's just hurry and get this over with. Now, guys, we talked about some mainly bad stuff. I mean, I do want to touch up on stuff that I did enjoy. Like I said, I did enjoy the combat, the jobs is what they call them here. I enjoyed that a lot. And then the last half of the story was actually pretty good. I don't want to hate on the game too much, but obviously, like, the first half of the game, you know, and that's where a lot of people would quit too. So you would think that they would put the best parts at the beginning and save it, you know, kind of stretch it out. I don't know. It just kind of feels like that they didn't do as good of a job. Talking with some people that have played Neo and Neo 2, that they're saying this is definitely a step backwards for them, at least for Team Ninja, the developers of this game. Overall, guys, I just wasn't really impressed. I kind of went in blind. I didn't play any demos. I didn't watch any videos. I mean, I saw the trailer, but you can never really trust cinematic trailers for obvious reasons. But overall, guys, if I were to give this a rating out of 10, for me personally, I think that this Final Fantasy Origins, or Stranger of Paradise, is a 6 out of 10. 5 for me is what an average game would be. So if I come out and it's pretty average, I would say 5. So I think this is above average, and mainly because of the combat. Combat was so fun. I actually had so much fun that I wish that they would have just done so much better with the graphics and the story, and this really could have been an amazing game. Yeah, guys, that is going to be it. That is my Stranger of Paradise review. Let me know down in the comments, guys, what you guys thought of it. Have you played it yet? Are you going to pick it up? I would say, for me personally, I would say wait for like a sale or something on this one. I kind of went in thinking, the Final Fantasy, like, here we go, Final Fantasy. I was even thinking, like, what's the game? Kingdom Hearts 3. I think it was going to be like that, but it was probably below all that. Like, I'm actually disappointed because I wanted to love this game, and I just didn't. So, take it or leave it, guys. That's going to be it for the video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.